is the people, is the people, is the people.
So what does it mean to pledge the people? I mean, think about that. Pledge the people. That sounds kind of creepy, don't it? Now, think about it like this. Let's say the bank forecloses on your house and they say to you, okay, we know you need a place to live. We know you need a place to raise your kids. So we're going to let you stay in the house. But we're going to take away all your luxuries. We're going to take away your car. We're going to take away your TV. We're going to take away your video game. And that's still not going to be enough. So if you agree to pledge us your children as collateral, then we will let you stay here. Now, what we're going to do is when your children becomes old enough to start working and paying taxes and actually making money, we're going to take some of that money and use that money to pay down the debt you owe us on this house. And this is what has happened to America. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're about to witness the greatest scam in human history that is still taking place today, that you are a part of, that you have no clue you are a part of. Watch this.
Ah, the government. It loves you and wants to keep you safe and well. It even wants to make paying taxes, fines, and court costs easier for you. How? Well, you'll need to meet your straw man. He was born the same day you were. He looks like you, has the same name, and lives in your house, but you never knew he existed. You will have even paid his parking tickets or taxes. The worst part? He's been dead from day one. From every birth certificate, a legal personality, or legal fiction, is created with the same name to confuse little old you into thinking it's you. So, there is a human you and a paper you, or as it's commonly known, a straw man. So when it seems like government officials, court clerks, or the police are speaking English, they aren't. They're speaking legalese, designed to make you agree to verbal and written contracts without even knowing about it, all spun from Black's Law Dictionary. For example, when the police say, "Do you understand?" you'll say, "Yes." What they are really saying is, "Do you stand under our authority?" Oops-a-daisy, you just created a verbal contract with them. Oh, you clever government. Did you know that whenever you register something, you are handing over title to the person you register it with? That's right. Whenever you register something with the government, they assume it belongs to them. Registered your car? Super! Now you are the registered keeper of your vehicle, and the government can crush it when you don't pay your, straw man's taxes. Expecting a new bundle of joy? Well then you need to register your little darling with a birth certificate. Then they can start the process all over again and create a new straw man for your little one. Isn't that great? So when Junior grows up, he'll be able to generate revenue just like you have. When you notify on your baby by signing the birth certificate, your child becomes a ward of state. And if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they'll assume it's okay to take the child away or make new rules for things they don't like. Not enough school? Smacking your child? Shouting too loudly? Then it's off to social services for the little one. When you get a bill, it's sent to you, but belongs to your straw man, not you. That's why bills, fines, and summons start with Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Sometimes you'll see your surname in capitals, just like on a gravestone. That's because your straw man is dead, and just a silly piece of paper, created before you could comprehend or even consent to it. When you go to court, you represent your straw man, so you, the human, take on any costs, fees, taxes, and fines involved for the straw man. The human you doesn't even need to pay them. But you made a contract with the court by appearing on behalf of your legal personality or straw man, just like the government knew you would. Confused? Well, don't worry. The government doesn't want you to know anyway. If you knew, you'd stop paying things like council tax and parking tickets. Because when you go to court, you are representing your straw man. You are you, alive and made of flesh and blood. Your straw man, or legal personality, is a piece of paper created from your birth certificate. And you think it's you. What a silly Billy.
Woodrow Wilson, as you may know, for any of you who have done any research into the Federal Reserve, the central bankers, and the fiat currency system that we've been enslaved into, you'll know that Woodrow Wilson is the president who signed into law the Federal Reserve Act. And you may already know that the Federal Reserve is a private corporation. It's not federal. It has no reserves. It's a private corporation owned by offshore bankers. It's an offshore company that prints paper out of thin air. There was a man named Edward Mandell House, and he was Woodrow Wilson's handler. House was an Englishman. Actually, the Earl of Grey was his handler. Okay, this is what House said. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property. That's the birth certificate. They will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living, the sin. They will be our chattel. That means slaves, means collateral. You're secured as collateral. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever. By operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges, the birth certificate. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans. And if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur in this manner. Every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless, and without any hope for their redemption, we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America.
This is a classified document?
No, it's not classified. It's available at thefreedompool.org, house quote, and it's a historical document. This denotes ownership, and when your parents were tricked into filling this out, they allowed your spirit and your soul to be monetized, and futures were sold on you.
Spirit and soul.
Now, this is my birth certificate. This is actually a share. See this red number? This A, I'm born in Canada, this is a Class A share. Now, this is called a CUSIP number. And all securities require a CUSIP number. And that's what this is. And you are held as collateral to secure the debt which our government owes to international bankers. So you and me and all these people here are actually collateral, and we don't even own our lives. We are chattel, and we believe we're free. I made an application to the Registrar General, and I got my original social insurance application. Now, before they sent it to me, they put a little piece of paper over this before they photocopied it, because my friend has his and they didn't block this out, and when you hold it up you see Bank of Canada. It is said that the best slaves are the ones who don't know that they're enslaved, and we all have invisible chains on us and we don't know it.
Another question that they ask me is, how come I haven't heard this on TV or on the radio or in the newspaper? Well, sweetie, the simple answer to that is the same people who own the television stations and the newspapers and the radio stations are the same people who are involved with the Federal Reserve. And here is a little statement that says that it only requires 5% ownership to significantly influence the media. Rockefeller is one of the original shareholders of the Federal Reserve. As early as 1963, the House Banking Subcommittee reported that Rockefeller, through Chase Manhattan Bank, controlled 5.9% of the stock in CBS and the bank, and gained interlocking directorates with ABC. I went all the way through high school, all the way through college, all the way through testing for the CPA, and all this Irish training, and didn't hear about any of this. You think they want this information out here for you guys to eat up and chew up and find out what's really going on? I don't think so. Now, another one. Why don't we just tell our elected officials about this? And to make a really long story short, the We the People Foundation, the same people that put out this ad, put together a hearing. And these 40 researchers, we're going to ask the IRS and the DOJ these questions, and we're going to have this big meeting in Washington called the Truth and Taxation Hearings. Okay? So we got together with 537 questions. So we sent them the 537 questions so they could research and have the answers, and what did they do? They reneged on coming. They signed off on it, but they reneged on coming. So you all didn't get to hear the truth. We went on and had the hearings anyway, put it on CD, marched around Washington, giving it to all 535 congressmen and senators. Please look at this information. We got stupid responses back like, thank you for visiting our offices in Washington. The next time you come to Washington, please visit us again. They don't care. Your presidents don't care. Another one that they ask me, or they'll say something like, well, this just sounds like it's some kind of conspiracy theory. Y'all hear that a lot? Okay. But tell me this, what's the difference between a conspiracy and a strategy? Don't you understand that this is all by design? All this black, white stuff. You're white, I'm black, you know. You're Democrat, I'm a Republican. You know, y'all heard of divide and conquer before, right? Why y'all letting them do it to us? While I'm sitting up here arguing with this man about what his great-great-great-granddaddy did to mine, there's this big old fence closing in around us. And while I'm sitting here wasting time and he's sitting here telling me why he doesn't know, we need to put our heads together and figure out how to get out of this fence that these people are building around us. Am I right? Yeah. That's what we got to be. Divide and conquer, we can't let that work anymore. It's been working all these years. Then we need to get together and understand. First of all, you need to understand what is going on with your money. You work hard. It's like we're a hamster on a wheel. This country started out with taxation without representation. Where are we now? Why did we get back to where we started? We got lazy and comfortable. Get out your...
A common misconception among people is that any rule or regulation that governs them falls under one category, law. But there are many other forms of law that people abide by without realizing that they simply do not apply to them. Another misconception is that a nation's constitution gives us our rights. A constitution does nothing more than list the rights that we already have. We are born with inalienable rights, endowed to us by our Creator. They are not given to us, and they cannot be given away. The most a person can do with a right is choose whether to exercise it or not. Maritime Admiralty Law is what's known as the law of the water. It is superseded by civil law and only applies to those who willingly contract themselves into it. The definition of Admiralty Law is a body of private international law governing the relationships between private entities which operate vessels on the oceans. Let's look at how and why a form of law that is fashioned to govern corporations, businesses, and vessels has imposed its rule over natural human beings. This is all done through a form of word magic. A simple perversion of language has made it possible to convince people around the world that these alternative laws apply to them. One of the predominant beliefs in modern culture is that licenses, permits, registrations, and other forms of documentation are required to operate motor vehicles, use public roads, build structures and establishments, engage in free enterprise, and much more. Sadly, these beliefs are based on little to no investigation whatsoever, and are false. This belief structure is perpetuated by Maritime Admiralty Law. This form of law was originally created to govern ships docking in foreign nations for the import or export of products and resources. It deals with banking and merchant affairs, not civil affairs. When a product is taken off of a ship and brought into a foreign land, that nation takes custody of the resource and accounts for it with a certificate. That certificate marks the birth date of that product in the custody of the respective nation. Think of why it is supposedly required to have a certificate of live birth in the first place. The Barron's Dictionary of Banking Terms defines a certificate as a paper establishing an ownership claim. So right there, we notice that everyone with a birth certificate is defined as being owned. People are used as collateral with other nations because the U.S. is bankrupt. The United States declared bankruptcy on March 9th of 1933. At this point, the U.S. began taking out loans from a private, non-government affiliated corporation called the Federal Reserve. With no money to pay back the loans, the United States began using the citizens as collateral. All birth and marriage certificates are literally warehouse receipts. Just look at the similarities of warehouse receipts and birth certificates. Both document the date of issue, a serial number, registration number or receipt number, a description of the product, and an authorized informant to notify the appropriate government agency. With all of this information being readily available, the majority of people are unaware of their involvement with Maritime Admiralty Law. This is possible through the manipulation of language. This Admiralty Law changed the meaning of the word person from a natural living person to a corporation. Driver's licenses, vehicle registrations, auto insurance forms, building permits, gun permits, work permits, tax filing documents, birth and death certificates, traffic citations, and many other forms of documentation that were once believed to be absolutely necessary only apply to persons or corporations. Upon signing such a legal document, you are indirectly waiving your rights under the Constitution and lowering your status to that of a corporation that is created with the same exact name as you. The only way to reconcile your true name from the name of the corporation is to take notice that the corporation has its name in all capital letters. This is known as capitis diminutia maxima.
Now, if you look it up, you'll find that before 1933, there was no birth certificates, there was no social security cards. People wrote down the birth of a baby in the back of a Bible. Now, going back to slavery. Now, there was a big debate on whether or not to give the freed slaves the same kind of rights as white people. Now, only 2 states agreed to do so. That was Pennsylvania and New York. Now, the Constitution says that a person has certain unalienable rights endowed to them by the Creator God. See, the Constitution felt like, when they wrote it, they felt like this. They felt like God gave you certain rights and you didn't need a piece of paper or a document to give you rights. And if you needed that, then God would have made sure you was born with the necessary documents. But since you wasn't born with such documents, you were born free. So no government should be able to oppose any kind of crazy rules on you. You had certain unalienable rights. Now, back then, if you ask a white person if they're a U.S. citizen, they wouldn't know what the hell you was talking about. They wouldn't know what citizenship means. They were called sovereigns. Now, one of the main reasons that they separated from England was because the kings were sovereign. The kings could do whatever they want. And the colonists felt like, we want everybody to be on the same kind of par. Yeah, there's going to be, levels of authority structures, but we want everybody to be equal. We want everybody to be sovereign. And sovereign means so over reign. And only basically kings and queens is sovereign. And that's how it was back then. Now, the white people was called sovereign. Now, they did not want to give black people that same title. So instead of giving us the title of sovereignty, they gave us civil rights. Now, black people was the first United States citizens. Now, the only real laws back then was basically no murder, no robbing or stealing, and you could not breach a contract. Those were like the basic laws back then. I mean, anything else, all these statutes and codes and, titles and articles that we have today did not apply to sovereign people. Now, if you think about it, if you look at those old Western movies, now remember, in those old Westerns, you see a big bar fight, crazy bar fight, they in there fighting. Didn't no cop come in there and lock everybody up and send everybody to jail. Same thing when they stepped outside and had a duel. They can basically shoot somebody and kill them in the street in front of everybody, and that person won't be hauled off to jail. There was different rules back then. Now, black people didn't have the same kind of rights. They had civil rights. Now, once the government got them protected under their jurisdiction, they gave black people different rules, different laws, and blacks' laws. Now, the Black Law Dictionary is still here today and it's still used today in law school, and that's where it came from. There's a whole different set of rules and laws set up to govern black people. Now, when black people became U.S. citizens, they had more laws, more rules they had to follow. They wasn't as free as white people was. Now, we know today that everybody is U.S. citizens. So how did that come to be? How did they get the white people to give up what seems to be basically complete freedom from the government to become a U.S. citizen? Now, that happened with the Great Depression. Now, the Great Depression was engineered. It was set up to do exactly that and to strip away the land and the gold from the people. Now, while the Depression happened and people were starving to death and losing their homes and everything, they became desperate. And the government offered them help, offered to buy them out, help them out if they became U.S. citizens, if they signed the UCC-1 filing statement and changed their status from a sovereign to a U.S. citizen, would basically put them under the jurisdiction of the government. Now, when they passed the law, when they passed the Social Security Act, this forced everybody else to get a Social Security number, the birth certificate, and become U.S. citizens. Now, with the whole straw man thing, let me explain how this whole thing works. Now, this is crazy. Basically now, since that law was passed and you are born with a birth certificate, that basically creates a document that is going to be later used for you to pay taxes. Now, how this goes is this. Now, let's say, now remember, America's bankrupt. We're borrowing our money from the Federal Reserve. Now, let's say the Federal Reserve is going to give us $10 billion, right? So America's going to borrow $10 billion from the Federal Reserve. Now, when this happened, remind you, all the money that was in place at that time became obsolete, became worthless. And the only money that was worth anything was the new money being printed by the Federal Reserve. So, no money is in circulation. We borrowed $10 billion from the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, the Federal Reserve loans us that money at interest. But think about it. If they only give us $10 billion, how are we going to pay the interest payments when only $10 billion is in existence? Where are we going to get the rest of the money from? If you only gave us $10 billion, how are we going to pay you that money back plus interest? This is how the whole straw man thing comes into place. Now, you have to really think deep about this because this is kind of crazy. You have to think about how much money that you're going to generate by your parents just being pregnant with you. Now, your mom's pregnant. She's going to go out and buy things. That is going to create tax money. Now, the doctor is going to get paid for taking care of you. Now, with that money he's going to go out and buy things, and that's going to create tax money. He's going to have to pay sales taxes on it. So just because you're born, you're generating money already. Now, your parents are going to have a baby shower. And all those people who come to the baby shower are going to go out and buy things. And that's going to generate tax money for the government. More tax money. Now, those stores who get that money are going to use that money to buy more stuff. And that's going to generate more tax money. So before you are born, you have already generated millions of dollars in tax revenue for the government. Now, when you are born, think about how much money you generate. You generate millions of dollars, millions. So by the time you're 65 and you retire, you will have generated probably $100 billion in tax money for the government. Now that is a commodity. That is something that you can borrow against because it's guaranteed you are going to pay money. So what they do is this. They take your birth certificate and they basically go ahead and sell it to other countries like China. So they say to China, hey, this person is going to pay $100 billion by the time they're 65. We want only, let's say, 20 billion of that 100 billion. Poof, there you go. Now, since 4 million babies are born in America every year, you do that times 4 million. That's a lot of money a year for the government. Now, the whole thing is this. We can say to China or the other countries that, we'll give you X amount of dollars per month to pay down the rest of the money we owe you, or we'll give you X amount of dollars a year to pay down the money we owe you. But the thing is, if the American dollar keeps going down and devaluing, then they're never going to make up their money if the dollar crashes. So they use the interest payment, or they use the money they make off of this whole straw man thing, off of your birth certificate, to pay down the interest payment that they owe to the Federal Reserve. Now, what they have did was basically take international maritime law, which is the law of the water, and make it the law of the land. Now, let me explain to you how they did that. Now, according to international maritime law, all ships are female by law. Now, a ship, when it comes into port, it berths at the dock. And if that ship is carrying, let's say, TVs, each one of those TVs has to have a certificate of manifest, because it wasn't there yesterday, it manifested today. Because whatever country that ship comes to, it's going to be making money for that country. Taxes are going to be paid on those TVs, so it has to have a certificate. Now, it's the same thing with your mom. Your mom gives birth to the dock, and you are born and you have to have a birth certificate, because you are now going to be paying taxes, or later paying taxes, to the government, to the place where you are born. You have just become a product, an international maritime product, basically, which is now the law of the water is now the law of the land. Now, a ship has cargo in its belly. Your mom had you in her belly, and both of you are products for the American government. Both of you are going to be paying taxes and making money for the government. Now, this whole thing works with court too. Now, because you are a U.S. citizen, all these rules apply to you. You are not supposed to go to court for anything but those laws that I mentioned before: stealing, robbing, murder, or breach of contract. Anything else, you are not supposed to be going to court for at all. It is unconstitutional. Now, I want you to take a look at something. Think about this. Now, when you go to court, you see that brown bar there. Look at that bar closely. Look at it. What does it look like to you? Doesn't it look like the same bar that's on those old wooden ships? When you come up on the ramp to get on the ship, you pass the bar. You open that little door, it looks the same way. It's because it's a ship. Ships fly flags. When you go to court, the flags are being flown. You can see them up there next to the judge. Now, the judge sits at a bench. Now, the Latin word for bench is bank. Look it up. It's bank. Where do we find banks? We find banks at rivers, river banks. What does river banks do? They direct the flow of the currency, the money. Now, this is not a play on words. This has all been set up and designed after international maritime law. The law of the water is now the law of the land. See, the judge is there because somebody is going to be paying money. So the judge is there for the bank. He represents the bank. He doesn't care who won or lose. He's going to get paid either way. He is there representing the bank. That's why he sits on the bench, which is Latin for bank. Now, as soon as you step in court and you say, I'm here, when they call your name, you have just agreed to represent that straw man, as she showed you in the video. Now, you got to think about how this comes into play in a lot of different things. Now, we tell people, they tell you, make sure your kid wear a helmet. Make sure your kid is strapped in the child seat. Make sure your kid wears pads, and make sure your kid goes to school and learns stuff. They're not saying this stuff. They're not making parents go to jail because their kid's not going to school for no reason. They're doing this to protect their investment. They don't give a damn about your kids. That's why they take your kids away from you if you start treating them wrong. They are protecting their investments. Your kids are the government's investments. They want to make sure your kids grow up and mature, just like mutual funds, just like freaking stock certificates. They want to make sure they grow up and mature and become somebody and get a job so they can pay their taxes, so they can pay back China and all these other countries who they borrow money from. So now maybe you understand why the government is going so crazy over immigration law, because those people are undocumented, meaning they don't have social security numbers. So when they come in, they're not paying any taxes. So the government's not getting its cut. They don't have any social security numbers at all. No birth certificates from America. So they are undocumented. The government's not getting their cut. And they're taking away from people who are documented, who could have those jobs to pay them their money. That's why they're pushing this whole immigration reform thing. Sure, they'll let you in the country, but they want you to be a citizen first so they can get their money. Now, you gotta understand, only a corporation can get money from a corporation. Basically, only a corporation can legally deal with another corporation. So they basically made you a corporation with the whole straw man thing. That's what your birth certificate was used for, to create another you, as she showed you in the video. Now, if you look at any bill you have, any bill you got, anything involving money that comes in the mail, your name will always be in capital letters. Any bill you get from the hospital, any bill, your phone bill, your electric bill, gas bill, all those bills, your name will always be in capital letters. Now, people look at that and they never put it in their head that something is up. Why is my name in capital letters? But this is how they get you. This is how they use your straw man. That doesn't apply to you. It applies to your straw man. But since your straw man don't exist, you're going to be the one who paid those bills. Now, it's a way to get around this whole thing, and depending on the response I get from this video, I'll show you how to beat that whole system. Okay, so I'm going to give you a perfect example of how Hollywood and the government laughs in your face about this whole straw man thing, and you don't even know what they're talking about. Now, there's a lot of movies out there that kind of illustrate or kind of give you little hints into this whole straw man business, but a lot of people don't figure it out. A lot of people can't read the symbology or the symbolism of these movies and books. Now, most of you, or all of you by now, should have seen the movie The Wizard of Oz. Now, The Wizard of Oz was written back in the year 1900 by a man named Frank Baum. It was just a book called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And in 1939, MGM changed it into a movie, the one that you all seen. Now, the whole thing about that movie is you got to really pay attention to that movie. I mean, I know it's a good movie to watch, and it's a children's movie, so a lot of grown-ups probably, don't get into it as much as kids do. But when you really dig into that movie and look at it, you could kind of see the symbolism behind the movie and how it relates to the federal bank and the whole straw man thing.